Thank you very much, Mr. Speaker. It's always a distinct honour for me to rise in this House of Commons. But today I rise with a mixture of sadness and a profound mixture of disappointment as well, Mr. Speaker. As a Member of Parliament who served, I'm sad because I'm sad whenever I see a veteran who feels that their government, or indeed their members of Parliament from any side of this place, is not here for their best interests. I know I speak for myself and some veterans who are on this side, but I also speak to my friends on the other side, including my friend from Winnipeg Centre who hosted an event with me last year for veterans. I'm disappointed, though, Mr. Speaker, because Ottawa has become a place where we can't actually have a serious debate about an important public policy area like this. And there's someone on that side proving that point right now, Mr. Speaker. I'm also disappointed with the low level of knowledge amongst people in this place and people who gather and speak to us outside this place on how our veterans have been served historically through to today. I'm also disappointed, Mr. Speaker, that just this week on a panel, when I suggested the Legion plays an important role in the care of our veterans, I was mocked for that position. So, Mr. Speaker, I'm going to use my time and the privilege I have as a Member of Parliament to try and raise the level of debate for one moment and to provide some education. And I hope my friends on all sides listen intently. I joined the Canadian Forces at 18, and when I released after 12 years of service, I said to my commanding officer, Colonel Al Blair, at 423 Squadron in Shearwater, that I would be a committed civilian to supporting our CF and our veterans. Mr. Speaker, I rarely speak about that work, but it's been a critical part of my adult life and a critical reason why I ran for Parliament. I'm actually an average soldier or airman, Mr. Speaker. I joined because I love this country. My area of Canada, Durham, has had profoundly successful and important soldiers, sailors, and airmen. Our community also lost Trooper Daryl Caswell during Afghanistan, Mr. Speaker. I know his family. I know the people that attended that funeral. And like many, I stood on Highway of Hero with my community to show support. My area has also been represented by parliamentarians. Reverend John Weir Foote, a Victoria Cross winner from Dieppe, served Durham in the provincial parliament. Our only Padre to receive the VC when he leapt out of the boats to care for his men and was in prison for the war. He was our local MPP. The other VC winner from Dieppe actually served in this place, Mr. Speaker, Cease Merritt from British Columbia. We've had some profoundly important veterans in this place. I'd invite the members to look at the statue of Baker out in the hallway, a sitting Member of Parliament who died in World War I. A sitting Member of Parliament from World War I from Uxbridge in my riding, Mr. Speaker, who was the MP for Ontario North, served at Vimy. And he died, but not at Vimy, Mr. Speaker, at the Royal Victoria Hospital in Montreal. He was brought back from the war because of a nervous breakdown. That's what it was called in World War I. We're now addressing these real needs. He had PTSD, Mr. Speaker. He leapt from a window in Montreal before having to face the families of Uxbridge who lost sons under his command. And just yesterday, my friend from Kingston in the Islands spoke about the Honourable John Matheson, another MP and one of my personal heroes who served our country with distinction. We have almost 600,000 veterans in Canada, Mr. Speaker, and 80,000 plus members of the Canadian Forces Regular Force Reserve who will be veterans in the future. 130,000 have a file with Veterans Affairs. 7,500 have an assigned case manager. And Mr. Speaker, a case manager is assigned when there's an assessment that the veteran needs additional support based on an assessment of income, health, living arrangements, family support, activity, and addictions. Veterans Affairs receives 730,000 calls per year. 15,000 veterans have registered for online MyVac accounts, primarily newer Afghan veterans. Home visits aren't tracked, Mr. Speaker, and that's unfortunate and something we should work on tracking because veterans with injuries can be visited at home. There are 68 VAC offices consisting of standalone VACs, 24 Joint Personnel Support Centers or Integrated Personnel Support Centers, and 17 OSI clinics. There are soon going to be services offered at 600 plus Service Canada offices. But, Mr. Speaker, to address the Legion point that my friends opposite did not think played an important role, I would say to this House, the Legion is the most important supporter of our veterans. It was founded in 1925, 1926, an Act of Parliament in this place, and Section 4 of that Act empowers them with the purpose to care for the welfare of our veterans. There's 1,461 branches across Canada, 1,400 veteran service officers. John Greenfield, the veteran service officer for Branch 178 in Bowmanville, has personally handled 450 cases, Mr. Speaker. Personally. He attends their home or they visit him. He helps face-to-face and gets benefits for those veterans. In 2012, 12,000 veterans were helped by these visits from veteran service officers who only have expenses paid and training through the Poppy Fund. The Legion has also helped with the Veterans Transition Network out of the University of British Columbia. And in recent years, the Veterans Affairs Ministry has empowered the Legion to run the visitation program where thousands of veterans, Korea, Cold War, have been visited by veteran services officers to assess their health and well-being. Mr. Speaker, the Legion remains the most important direct face-to-face contact for our veterans, and I thank them deeply for that. So, Mr. Speaker, the question here before us in this House, and in conversations I've had in recent days, including with some veterans that came to this Hill concerned about the closure of some offices, we have to talk about assessing the needs of our veterans now and in the future. As my colleague from Etobicoke Centre said, our veterans who are in their 20s from Afghanistan and our veterans who are in their 80s or 90s, Mr. Speaker. My area of Ontario, the Durham region writ large, Mr. Speaker, has never had a standalone Veterans Affairs office. Have the veterans not been cared for? Yes, they have, Mr. Speaker. There's a range of ways they have been cared for and will continue to be cared for. The important issue we have before us as parliamentarians, as Canadians, is to say, is it better to stay put and watch offices have 5, 6, 10, 12 visits per day? Or is it better to open up 2, 3, 4, 5 offices across the country to address mental health? Veterans Affairs offices, Mr. Speaker, are administrative points of contact. We've heard that term. They do not deliver benefits to our veterans. They help them access them. I would suggest the top person that helps them access them are veteran service officers from across the country. They can also access these services through a range of other means. And what our government is doing with Service Canada, Mr. Speaker, is now allowing that direct access point where face-to-face could be required to help with forms or other things at Service Canada offices. Mr. Speaker, in October, when some of these veterans came to Ottawa, I met with them. I attended the media event. And one of them said to us, our issue, it relates specifically to whether Veterans Affairs training or experienced case officers will be available in Service Canada. We listened, Mr. Speaker. The 8 closures will have Veteran Affairs case workers in them as of next week, full stop, permanent. And with the caseload of less than 10 visits a day, 1 is appropriate, Mr. Speaker. And Mr. Speaker, in most cases, the Service Canada office is in the same building or nearby. In my region of Durham, this will now give 4 offices in the area for that personal contact if one of our Legion veteran service officers can't help them, that veterans didn't have before these changes. So, Mr. Speaker, I know this is an important debate. I know my friend from Sackville Eastern Shore, passionate about these issues. I met him as an officer at Shearwater, and I truly believe he has veterans at heart. We also have the responsibility, Mr. Speaker, to ensure our system addresses the needs now and in the future. And as a veteran, we've got to make sure we meet the needs of all veterans. We've got to meet the growing mental health challenges our veterans face. And these changes are part of our plan to serve our veterans better, Mr. Speaker. Thank you very much.
Questions and comments. The honourable member for Victoria.
I appreciate my colleague from Durham's comments in this important and very disturbing debate. One of my constituents is Ms. Sheila Fines. Her son is Stuart Langridge. He took his own life in 2008, having been told by the military that it was a function of substance abuse rather than the deep-rooted mental health problems that he was facing before he took his life. My constituent, Ms. Fines, talks about an endless array of investigations by Board of Inquiry, military ombudsman, and she speaks passionately about the level of frustration that she feels. She claims that the expression, "if you're not deployable, you're not employable," continues to rule at the military services in Canada. I quote her, "The military is always looking for ways to distance themselves from any responsibility." To my colleague, is her experience unusual or typical?
Honourable Parliament Secretary to the Minister of International Trade.
Mr. Speaker, I'd like to thank the member for his question, and I'd like to offer my condolences to the family of Mr. Langridge and suggest to my colleague that these changes are so that we can help treat people like Mr. Langridge. We know there are mental health challenges, Mr. Speaker. I think everyone in this House knows. These changes, and these are the decisions of government, Mr. Speaker. Do we open and try and hire more mental health workers? Do we open more operational stress injury clinics? Do we fund the Veterans Transition Network run by a veteran who's overcome PTSD? Or do we only do things the way they were done in the past? I would suggest to my honourable colleague that a combination of work with the Canadian Forces while the person is still serving and with Veterans Affairs after release has to catch mental health issues quickly. We have to train their unit to recognize these challenges and work with the families as well, Mr. Speaker.
Questions and comments. The honourable member for Humber St. Barb, Bay Verte, rather.
Thank you very much, Mr. Speaker. In Humber St. Barb, Bay Verte, in Corner Brook, Newfoundland and Labrador, there are two very important and productive offices that I'd like to highlight. One is a Canadian Armed Forces Recruitment Centre, which is one of the most successful, efficient, and highest performing recruitment centres in all of Canada, because young people from Western Newfoundland and Northern Newfoundland are being recruited to the Canadian Armed Forces at a very significant and substantial rate. In fact, the Canadian Armed Forces decided, Mr. Speaker, that they would expand that office. Now, the other office is a Veterans Affairs Service Centre. That office is closing as of tomorrow. I'd like to ask the honourable member, where exactly does he think the veterans of tomorrow will come from? Will it come from a place where recruitment to the Canadian Armed Forces is on an upward trend, where it's rising? The current Canadian Armed Forces contingent is overrepresented proudly by the people of Newfoundland and Labrador. In fact, while Newfoundland and Labrador only represents 1.5% of the Canadian population, the actual contingent of people within the Canadian Armed Forces represent 8 to 10% from the province of Newfoundland and Labrador. Where exactly are the future veterans coming from? They're coming from the places where they are.
The honourable Parliament Secretary to the Minister of International Trade.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker, and I'm glad the honourable member asked this question in the way he did. I had the profound honour to serve aboard HMCS St. John's, Mr. Speaker, the proud frigate for the province of Newfoundland and Labrador, which the member's right. Atlantic Canada, Newfoundland, and Labrador in particular have a higher level of enrollment in the Canadian Forces. And I can tell you, Mr. Speaker, within the Canadian Forces and within the Navy, all the Newfoundlanders and Labradorians want to get on that ship. So he's right. We're recruiting from those areas. The issue we've got to address is where are they going to settle after service and how are they going to access need? I would ask the member to think in the next 25 years, these people signing up now at the recruiting center, how will they draw services, Mr. Speaker? Veterans of my area, and I've talked to some, even ones that have released with service injuries, they don't visit the traditional bricks and mortar office. They tend to use the phone. They tend to use and register for a MyVac account. As I said in my remarks, Mr. Speaker, we need to address the needs now and in the future and offer flexibility for these veterans who are critical, including our special veterans from Newfoundland and Labrador, Mr. Speaker.